Said it before, going to say it again. I love our band. All right. Those of you who don't know, I'm Pastor Chris, and I have the privilege of not only sharing today's message with you, but kicking off a new message series. And to do that, I'd like to tell you guys about the best Christmas gift I ever received. It was in December, obviously, because Christmas. Don't know why I had to clarify that. Of 2007, when my father-in-law gave me this right here. Does anyone know what this is? This ancient piece of technology is an iPod Nano 2nd Gen. It was the first Apple product I ever owned. They're not sponsoring this message, I'm just telling you. No, but that gift made a huge impact in my life. See, I was in this transitional phase at the time. I was working at an insurance company, sitting in a cubicle doing associate underwriting, which I know that all of you are looking at me and thinking, well, that fits his personality perfectly. It did not, and so to survive, I always had my earbuds in. I was always listening to something. But before I got the iPod, music was just kind of a background thing to me. It was something that, played when I was in the car or going out somewhere, but it wasn't something I listened to. But then after I got that and I started spending each day, hour after hour, with those earbuds in, I started to hear music in a new way. I started to pick up on lyrics I hadn't heard before, instruments I hadn't heard before. And the more that I did that, the more powerful the music got. And ever since then, I have loved music, and I've loved the power of music. One great author says that when words fail, music speaks. Another great artist, Bruce Springsteen, once said, the best music is essentially there to provide you something to face the world with. Music is a way that we engage with our surroundings, especially when we don't have the words to do it. Example, how many of you in this room have a song that you are deeply and emotionally connected with? Is there anyone there? I saw a meme a little while back, and it said when I was in my 20s, I used to hear a song on the radio and think, that's my jam. And then when I was in my 30s, I'd hear that song at the club and think, that's my jam. Now I'm at the grocery store and I hear that song and I think, that's my jam. But how many of you have had that moment where you're out shopping and somewhere that song starts playing? And all you were trying to do was pick out frozen vegetables, and the next thing you know, you're reliving that breakup from your junior year of high school. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Has anybody been there? Yeah, music is powerful. Martin Luther. You guys don't know this, but every time I quote Martin Luther, I get a small bonus from Dan. Martin Luther once said, my heart, which is so full to overflowing, has often been solaced and refreshed by music when sick and weary. How many of you have ever been broken and you run to music to find something to uplift your soul? Yeah. Martin Luther, again, second bonus, says this, and I love it. A person who does not regard music as a marvelous creation of God must be a clodhopper indeed and does not deserve to be called a human being. He should be permitted to hear nothing but the braying of asses and the grunting of hogs. It's Martin Luther, so I got to say a bad word in church. But I love that Martin Luther's like, if you don't like music, you're not a human. Listen to the pigs. Music is powerful. Beethoven once said that music is the mediator between the spiritual and the sensual life. Because, see, I think that music not only connects us to the world around us or gives us a way to experience our surroundings, but it also gives us a way to connect with God and experience the divine. And it's out of that we are starting this series today entitled Sermons from Spotify, where we're going to look at the power of music and the way that God speaks through certain songs into our lives. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very evangelical culture where everything in the world got one of two labels. It was either Christian or it was secular. So if I mentioned to my dad that I was listening to new music, he would ask, well, is it Christian music or is it secular music? And the idea is that, well, God could only be found in Christian music like this. But here's what I discovered as I continued to grow and mature in life, is that God can show up in all kinds of music, no matter what the label. How many of you guys have ever heard Jeremiah 29:11? It's a verse that Christians love to take out of context and put on paperweights. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper," that whole one. And it's true. What we don't often mention is that the prophet who said that also explained to them that they were going to go into exile, lose everything, and be separated from the land that they love. But right after he says that, he says this, that even in the midst of all that chaos and turmoil, if you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. And how does that apply to this? Well, I believe that if you turn on the radio and you begin to listen, and you listen for God, and that you look for God, and that you will be surprised where God shows up. How many of you have ever been watching a movie or listening to a song that might have that secular label on it, but then all of a sudden God just hits you? Like that is God speaking to me. I've had that moment many times, and that's where this series comes from. This series actually started out when I was at a church many years ago entitled Sermons from My iPod. But as we've advanced, we've turned it to Sermons from Spotify. We did it a few years ago here, and well, it's back. And so for the next 4 weeks, you're actually going to hear from 3 of us. I'm going to be preaching, Dan's going to be preaching, but Dave is also going to be preaching. And we've each chosen a song, a secular song, that we have found God in. And just as a fun activity, I would like to show you the artist of those 4 songs, and your job is to guess which one is Dan's. All right, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and here's 4. That one's Dan's. No, but today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite artists growing up, Linkin Park. Yes, somebody was like, yes, it's the moment I've been waiting for. Brett, you didn't think you were going to hear that at church today. No, but we're going to be talking about Linkin Park. We're going to be talking about one of their songs entitled One More Light. And before I get into more of why this song is so meaningful and powerful, I actually want you guys to hear a bit of it here. And so I've taken the music video and put the lyrics over the top. And so for the next 2.5, 3 minutes, I want you guys just to listen to this song and take in these lyrics. Powerful. When I announced that I was going to do this song, Dave asked Shannon and Carrie to play it, which you guys will hear in just a bit. And when Shannon found that out, she sent me a text, and she said, "Is this message going to be about suicide?" And there's a reason she asked that question, and I'll answer that with 2 dates. First date is July 20th of 2007. Because on that date, the lead singer who you saw in that video there, the one singing it, took his own life. Just a few weeks before they were going to go on tour and sing this song to millions and millions of people. Now, I'm not somebody who gets caught up in celebrity culture. So when a celebrity passes, it usually doesn't affect me too much. But I'll tell you this, when I heard about Chester's passing, that's his name, I was wrecked. I was one of the few times that I just couldn't stop crying. And it gave this song a different kind of meaning to it. But the power of this song continued on. In fact, almost 2 years to the date later, on July 24th of 2019, there's an incredible story about a healthcare worker that was on her way to work. She's passing over a bridge. She actually took a different route that day, not her normal one. And as she's passing over this bridge, she sees an individual on this ledge about to jump. And so she pulls the car over, she gets out, she goes out on the ledge, and she sits down next to him. And I want you to hear a small bit from a news clip covering that day.
There was a moment he moved forward, and I did kind of move towards him like, nope, you go, I go.
To try and comfort the man, Christina recited a song lyric from one of her favorite bands.
It's a Linkin Park song. Who cares if one more light goes out in a sky of a billion stars? Like, I do. One person cares.
Who cares if one more light goes out? We'll I do.
And I don't know if it clicked with him, but he just cried.
Wow. Soon after, an officer pulled over and rescued this man. And he continued to live his life. And so I understood her question, but the truth is, it's not about suicide. We're zooming out a little bit more today. But before I do that, I am going to say this. If you're wrestling with that, if you're battling those demons, I get it. I've been there. And I want you to know that I'm here for you. In fact, before I move on, I want to throw this number up on the screen. That's my personal cell phone number. If anyone in this room is battling those demons, if anyone in this room needs to have a conversation with someone, just take that number right now, put it in your phone, and I will be there to talk to you whenever you need to talk. But today what I want to do is I want to focus on that broader theme, and I want to talk about light and this idea of one more light. And to do that, I want to turn to Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. If you don't know, the Sermon on the Mount is recorded in Matthew. You start reading the New Testament, you'll hit it at the 5th chapter. Many people believe that this is a collection of a lot of the messages that he preached throughout his ministry. And it's powerful. And in the beginning of that, he shares this passage right here. He says, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." Now, something often happens with the Sermon on the Mount. We've talked about it a lot in church. Churches have for over 2,000 years. And because of that, a lot of the language of the Sermon on the Mount has become common vernacular for Christians. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. Well, this passage right here, we use it at every one of our baptisms. You go through, love your enemies, build your life on a solid foundation. Like, these are ideas that we are very familiar with, and because of that, I think we sometimes lose the power of what Jesus is doing. But the truth is, what Jesus is doing is quite radical. If you think about the setting of the Sermon on the Mount, sometimes it might be tempting to just imagine a couple dozen people sitting around Jesus, but we know from the stories of Jesus feeding the 5,000 and the 4,000, and that was only a count of the men who were there, that Jesus was speaking to very large crowds, potentially 7,000 or more people. And those crowds were extremely diverse. There wasn't just Jewish people going to hear a rabbi. It was non-Jewish people, Gentiles from all over the world that had heard about this speaker, and they were traveling. They wanted to hear what he had to say, and they were people of all kinds of backgrounds. There was the rich and there was the poor. There was the faithful to Israel and the faithful to Rome. There was even one group that was so politically motivated, they hated Rome so much that they walked around with daggers inside of their cloak. They were called zealots, and whenever they'd see a Roman soldier, they'd try to stab him. They're also in the crowd. So to say it's diverse is kind of an understatement. And it's in that crowd that Jesus uses this language, "You are the light of the world." Now, that language was somewhat familiar to the Jewish people, but not like that. See, they would say that Jerusalem is a light of the world. Jerusalem is a light to the Gentiles. In other words, the Jewish faith, the religion, the institution, the temple, that is the light to the world, to all people. And then you have Jesus who comes along and he does something crazy. See, Jesus says, no, you are the light of the world. Like, there were people in the crowd that day that heard that and thought, oh, he slipped up there. Jesus, no, I think you meant to say Jerusalem, not you. No, we are not. No, I'm not, especially the zealots, they're not. No, the other people here, no, they are not the light of the world. But what Jesus is doing is Jesus is telling us that we can be the light of the world, and this is a radical idea. Like, think about this. that Jesus is coming to this crowd, into this crowd today, and he's coming to each of us, and he's saying, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. And that person that's about 3/4 of the way back that is thinking, well, I'm not the light of the world. You are the light of the world. Jesus is telling everyone in the crowd that you are the light of the world. See, Jesus does something in the book of John that's pretty crazy. He says, but while I'm here, I am the light of the world. And then a little later in John, he says something that's always amazed me since the first time I read it as a kid. It says, I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done and even greater works because I am going to be with the Father. What I think Jesus is saying there is not that we're going to perform bigger miracles than he did, but that Jesus, as a light, could only shine in one place at one time as he traveled around. But then he looks at this crowd and he passes the torch. He says, no, you are the light of the world. You can go out and shine in all the places that I can't be right now. He's calling you to be that one more light, to go out there and to share the good news, the kingdom of God, to live out the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. That's what it means to be a light. And here is something that I think is so powerful. Some of you might hear this and think, okay, well, I don't have a huge platform. I don't have a huge following. I'm at a point in my life where I'm not even surrounded by that many people. My light is not going to be very bright. It's going to be pretty small, but here's what I believe. In a world that's dark, a little light can go a long way. How many of you have ever been wandering around in the dark? Maybe you woke up in the middle of the night and you had to pee and all the lights were off. Any light is really helpful. Some people are wandering around in the world like that, and they need that little bit of light. And yeah, sometimes that light comes in a big way, like sitting on a ledge and keeping somebody from jumping. But I want to tell you about a little light in my life. I shared this with a group of volunteers a couple years ago, but I want to tell you guys the full story here. We're going to go back to 2007 again, in October of that year, when I ran my first marathon, the Chicago Marathon. And that year was a hot mess, literally. They had record heat in Chicago. It got up to 96 degrees that day. You throw in about 30,000 runners and a bunch of tall buildings, and it gets really hot really fast, especially for a group of people that thought we're going to Chicago in October, fall. And that race was hard. And it got even harder about midway through because there were so many runners that were hot, they were just grabbing all the cups of water and pouring it on themselves to cool down to the point that the race ran out of water. And so you were running to one aid station, no water. You ran to the next aid station, praying and hoping that there would be water. And I remember, I was trying to finish that race, but it was miserable. And I thought to myself, this was a mistake. Why did I think I could do this? And I thought to myself, we're going to finish whatever today looks like, and then I am going to be done. I will be a casual runner, goes out and does a few miles here and there, but never again am I going to do this stupid thing. And then I got to mile 21, and I was trying my best to do something that kind of looked like running. Mile 21 is in Chinatown. It's actually my favorite spot on the course because you go around this big corner. Their whole community comes out to show off their culture. There's one of those big dragon things. I love it. Lots of energy. But as I was coming around that, I thought, I got 5 more miles to go. I am toast. I am done. And then there's this dude standing behind the dragon, and he looks up at me and had my name on my jersey. And he goes, Chris, you have got this. And I thought to myself, I've got this. I do have this. That guy thinks that I have this. I've got this. Now, I was very dehydrated and delusional, but I took his words to heart. For the rest of that race, I'm like, that guy back there thought I've got this. And I carried those words for 5 miles, and I crossed that finish line. And I went back home and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to do this again. And I started recruiting some people to do it with me. Ended up training about 30 people to do the Chicago Marathon the next year while raising money for Team World Vision, which provides clean water in places around the world that need it most. And that journey continued on, and then I moved here to Kansas City, and I met up with a buddy, and we said, what would happen if we brought it here to this city? And then we did that, and over the past 7 years, there have been just shy of 8,000 people run for Team World Vision who've raised just short of $3 million. Now, I don't say that to brag. I really don't. That was all God. But I will tell you this. There was a guy on the race course at mile 21 that day who the moment I went around the next corner, he forgot me. He probably cheered for 600 people that day. He saw my name on a jersey and just yelled it out because he was bored. But you know what? That small little bit of light in that really dark place has continued to shine, and it's spread, and it's continued to illuminate both my life and the lives of those around me. And I have to wonder what little bit of light you could be in the darkness that you often find yourselves in. What encouraging word could you give? What donation could you make? Who could you sit with? Who could you listen to? What enemy could you love? Who could you forgive? In a way of living out the good news that serves as a little bit of light in the midst of the darkness. There's a great story by a famous author. He recounts growing up. And when he was growing up, they had gas street lights. And so somebody would come along at night and light each of them as they went down the road. And this author, as a young boy, found himself pressed up against the window. And his parents asked him, "What are you looking at?" And I love his response. He says, "Look at that man. He's punching holes in the darkness." I think God needs more people punching holes in the darkness. Because who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. And God does. And there are people who need your light. There are people that aren't going to see any other light, but God has put you there to be that light. And to remind them that if their light went out, God cares. And you care. So we're going to do something now, because I believe that when we come together and let our light shine out, the world gets brighter. And let me ask, show of hands, how many of you have ever had somebody in your life that served as a light that you could tell me that story right now if we were sitting down for a cup of coffee? Yeah. So what we're going to do is, I'm actually here in just a second, we're going to drop all the lights up. And these two are going to sing that song again. And I want you to think back in your life. I want you to think about somebody who has been a light. Maybe it's somebody who passed. My best friend Anthony pops in my mind. My grandpa pops into my mind. Or maybe it's somebody who's still around. But what I want you to do is I want you to appreciate that light. Because if that light went out, it would make a difference in your life. And then through the second half of the song, I want you to think about how you could be that light to somebody else. And here's how I want to do that. Lights are going to go down, completely down here in just a sec. And as that person pops in your mind and you begin to appreciate that light, I want you to pull out your cell phone. I want you to turn on the flashlight, and I want you to point it towards the stage. And as we all gradually begin to do that, I want you to notice how bright the room gets as we finish out the service today. Does that sound all right? Let's go ahead and drop those lights out.
Should have stayed where the signs I ignored. Can I help you not to hurt anymore? We saw brilliance when the world was asleep. There are things that we can have but can't keep. If they say, who cares if one more light goes out in a sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares if someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. The reminders pull the floor from your feet. In the kitchen, one more chair than you need. Oh, and you're angry, and you should be. It's not fair. Just 'cause you can see it doesn't mean it isn't there. If they say, who cares if one more light goes out in a sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares if someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. Who cares if one more light goes out in a sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares if someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. Will I do?
Your light matters. Go be the light and serve the Lord. Thank you, guys.